All About Dinosaurs by Roy Chapman Andrews. Illustrated by Thomas W. Voter. Narrated by Anita Saran. Chapter 5. Thunder Lizard and King of Tyrants. First, there are a few facts that must be explained. The Earth is about 2 billion years old. That great period of time has been divided into eras by scientists. The age of reptiles is called the Mesozoic or Middle Era. Each era is further divided into periods. The Mesozoic era has 3 periods: Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. Triassic, the oldest, began about 200 million years ago. That is when the first dinosaurs appeared. Cretaceous, the youngest, ended 60 million years ago. Thus, during 140 million years, reptiles ruled the world. Dinosaurs on land, marine reptiles in the ocean, and flying reptiles in the air. There are no simple everyday names for dinosaurs, so we must use the scientific names. Every name is put together out of Latin or Greek words, and they are supposed to indicate something about the animal. For instance, the name of the greatest of all flesh-eating dinosaurs is Tyrannosaurus rex. This comes from tyranno, tyrant, saurus, lizard, rex, king. Thus it means king of the tyrant lizards. Brontosaurus, the thunder lizard. Best known to the public of all the dinosaurs is the great Brontosaurus. The man who gave the animal its name said it was so big the earth must have thundered when it walked. But anyway, it was a thundering big reptile. This is the dinosaur pictured most often in the funnies. It figured in a movie called The Lost World. Cartoonists often show it chasing terrified explorers through a strange jungle of prehistoric plants. Of course, that is all imagination. The dinosaur lived in the Jurassic period, 100 million years ago, and no men were alive then. The thunder lizard was 60 to 70 feet in length, almost twice as long as an ordinary schoolroom. Probably it weighed about 80,000 pounds. That is more than 10 elephants. The very long neck and tail made up a good deal of the length of the animal. But the head was so small that it must have looked utterly ridiculous. The small brain weighed less than a pound. It shows that the creature was just about as stupid as an animal could be and still live. Probably all its actions were directed by instinct and very little by conscious intelligence. The mouth was so small and the spoon-shaped teeth so weak that the thunder lizards must have had to eat continually. Otherwise, the great bulking mass of flesh and bones never could have stayed alive. Brontosaurus spent its life wading about in the shallows of lakes and rivers, and in swamps. With its long neck, it could easily reach the plants that formed its food. The water helped to support its huge body too. Although the legs looked like tree trunks and were very heavy, the joints were poorly formed. This shows that the creature spent very little time on land. It had to come out at some time to lay eggs, but it couldn't go far from the water. It wouldn't dare to do so anyway, for it might be killed and eaten by the fierce carnivorous dinosaurs that roamed all over the country. In spite of its size, Brontosaurus had no means of defense, so when it saw a flesh-eater prowling on shore, snapping its great bear-trapped jaws, the thunder lizard pushed out into deep water where the attacker could not follow. During the Jurassic period, when Brontosaurus lived, Wyoming, Montana, and other of our western states were occupied by shallow lakes and rivers. The Rocky Mountains had not yet been born. Today that country is made up of bare, grassy plains with few trees. Then it was covered with wonderful vegetation. Many dinosaurs lived and died there. It is the best place for hunting fossils in the entire world. Dr. Walter Granger, who later was with me in the Gobi Desert, spent many years collecting fossils in Wyoming. In 1898, near Medicine Bow, Wyoming, he discovered a brontosaurus skeleton. With 2 men, he worked 6 months taking out the bones. The museum people spent 4 years in piecing together the broken parts and mounting the skeleton. The petrified bones were very heavy. One upper leg bone alone weighed 570 pounds. When the skeleton was mounted, it measured 66 feet 8 inches in length and 15 feet 2 inches in height. Those of you who live in New York City must have seen the Brontosaurus in the American Museum of Natural History. If not, you had better go, for you will never forget it. Brontosaurus was a member of the group of dinosaurs known as the Sauropoda. They were the largest animals that ever walked on 4 legs. Another was called Diplodocus. It was more slender than his cousin. It was the longest of all dinosaurs because of its extraordinary whip-like tail. The nostrils or nose openings were placed on the top of the head so that it could breathe while its body was under water. The finest skeletons of Diplodocus are in the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Brachiosaurus was even heavier than the thunder lizard. Its nostrils were raised on a sort of hump on the very summit of the head. Thus the great dinosaur could wade on the bottom feeding on the soft vegetation. Sometimes it would poke its head above the surface and look about, just as men in a submarine use the periscope to observe the scene above water. Allosaurus. The principal enemy of the thunder lizard was Allosaurus. He was the mighty hunter of the Jurassic period. He was 35 feet long and stalked across the country in majestic splendor. Like the lion or tiger of today, he was lord of all he surveyed. Allosaurus was a giant meat-eater. When you look at his enormous jaws armed with dagger-like teeth, you can understand why all other dinosaurs were terrified when he appeared. Allosaurus walked only on his hind legs. He could leap and strike with great quickness. The heavy tail balanced his body, for his front legs were very small, and he seldom came down on all fours. His hands ended in great hooked claws, which were regular talons. They helped him hold his prey and tear the flesh off the bones. We have proof that Allosaurus killed and ate the big thunder lizards. A skeleton of Brontosaurus found in Wyoming had parts of the backbone bitten off, and tooth marks showed on many of the bones. When the Allosaurus jaw was compared with these marks, it fitted them exactly. Also, broken teeth of Allosaurus were mixed with the Brontosaurus bones. In the same deposit of fossils, the remains of other vegetable-feeding dinosaurs showed they had been scraped by the teeth of the big flesh-eater. The skeleton of an Allosaurus is mounted in the American Museum of Natural History as though the animal were feeding on a dead thunder lizard. Tyrannosaurus rex. Imagine the shore of a lagoon near the great island sea of Montana. Then pretend it is 70 million years ago in the Cretaceous period, long after Allosaurus lived. It is a low-lying country broken by thick clumps of ginkgo and sycamore trees. There are many figs, palms, and bananas too. The day is hot. Banks of mist hang over the water. A huge vegetable-feeding dinosaur, Trachodon, waddles along the shore, pushing its broad duck-like bill into the mud. It finds soft bulbs and trailing water plants, food it loves. Suddenly, it hears a sound. Swinging about, it sees the gigantic figure of a Tyrannosaurus dimly outlined among the trees of the forest's edge. The ugly head towers among the highest branches. The ponderous tail stretches backward, lost in smothering vegetation. Wild with fear, the Trachodon hurries toward the water, but its fat, hulking body can only move slowly. In 2 leaps, the king of tyrants lands on his back. The giant's head seems to split apart as the great mouth opens and clamps shut on the duckbill's neck. The dagger teeth crunch through bones and flesh like shears cutting paper. There is frantic thrashing for a time as the colossal beasts roll in the slippery muck. Then the Trachodon lies still. Its head hangs loosely, almost severed from the neck by 6-inch teeth. Tyrannosaurus Rex, the king of tyrants, rises on his 2 powerful hind legs and looks about. The 50-foot body is balanced by a heavy tail. Its head is massive and the jaws 4 feet long. The short forelimbs seem tiny, but the clawed hands have a grip of iron. Nothing about Tyrannosaurus is weak. It is the most terrible creature of destruction that ever walked upon the earth. For a few moments, the tyrant king gazes into the dark reaches of the jungle and out across the water. Then it settles to the feast. Huge chunks of warm flesh, torn from the duckbill's body, slide down the cave-like throat. At the end of an hour, half the skeleton lies naked. The king's stomach is full to bursting. Walking slowly to the jungle, he stretches out beneath a palm tree. For days, or perhaps a week, he lies motionless in a death-like sleep. When his stomach is empty, he gets to his feet and goes out to kill again. That is his life, killing, eating, and sleeping. Duckbills were not the tyrant's only prey. Any of the smaller dinosaurs might die under the weight of its great body and crushing jaws. Thanks to Dr. Barnum Brown of the American Museum of Natural History, we know much of the Tyrannosaurus and his habits. In 1900, Dr. Brown found part of a skeleton in South Dakota. More bones of a different creature were unearthed 2 years later on Hell Creek, Montana. That was half a century ago, and Montana was still the Wild West. Dr. Brown said his base of supplies was at Miles City on the railroad. This was 130 miles from the Badlands where he had heard he might find dinosaur fossils. For 5 days he and his men marched across rolling prairie and at last reached the little log post office of Jordan, Montana. 10 miles further, they entered the Badlands, a wilderness of cliffs and domes, cut by canyons, ravines, and gullies. The rocks looked as though they had been painted in brilliant colors of red, yellow, and orange. The country was good for fossil hunting, but little else. That is why it was called Badlands. Dr. Brown made camp on Hell Creek. Nearby, the stream had cut into a hill, exposing rounded sandstones which had rolled down to the water. Some of them contained bones, and the fossil hunters traced them to their source halfway up the hill. There, in a layer of buff-colored sand, they found the first complete skeleton of Tyrannosaurus. Most of it lay just as the animal died, 70 million years ago. The bones were petrified and enclosed in a bluish sandstone, almost as hard as granite. The loose surface could be easily removed, but lower down the rock was like iron. In order to get to the bone level, slices of the hillside had to be carved off with plows, scrapers, and even dynamite. Finally, the men made a hole in the hill 30 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 25 feet deep. For 2 summers, they worked at the job of taking out the skeleton. Some of the sandstone blocks containing bones were of huge size. One weighed 4,150 pounds, and 4 horses were needed to drag it in a wagon across the plains to the railroad. In 1908, Dr. Brown found another skeleton in the same Montana Badlands. All 3 skeletons stand among the most prized exhibits in the American Museum. Every year, millions of people gaze at the petrified bones of the king of tyrants.